Adora Crystal Evans, my friend. So good to see you. And before we get into your inspirational story from inspirational people like yourself, what a great week we had last week with you and Lee and I at the great Ken Jocelyn, the GSD Elite Mastermind conference in Atlanta, Georgia. And we've spoken via text, thanks to Ken, the master connector. And it was such an honor and a pleasure to meet you. And you're here in Dallas, D-Town, the 214. And it's so good to see you. Adora Crystal Evans is an elite connector and event producer and now into TV. Adora, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I feel so grateful for Ken. Him and I often say we feel like, well, he calls me the female version of him. And I didn't get that at first until I got in proximity and how he just loves bringing people together for transformation, inspiration, and the furthering of the kingdom is so inspiring. And I feel really grateful that we got to connect and meet in that.
What was one of your key takeaways from the GSD Grow Stack Drive GSD Elite Mastermind conference in Atlanta? What was something that inspired you that you took away from the conference that we attended last week?
This time, the lake day was the most important part for me. And so the takeaway in that is play, fun, that, a lot of times driven people like you and I who are driven to make a difference, driven to make an impact, we're constantly, pushing things forward, praying things forward, moving things, contemplating how to do those things, that the opportunity to have fun and be in nature and to commune together in that environment was almost like worship for me, when it kind of breaks off things that you don't even know you're holding. It kind of like, I don't know, I think of like when you step in mud and it dries and it's kind of crackly, like how, a good worship song kind of makes me tender and receptive. That play, that communion was huge for integration. It made me realize like I need to do more of that, more of that.
Actually, absolutely. And for everyone who's watching or listening to this episode of the show, we'll have the link for Ken Jocelyn's platform and Grow Stack Drive GSD in the description, so you can check it out. And we are so grateful for Ken Jocelyn. But let's get to you, Adora. I was just, Lee and I, getting to know you, and you are an incredible woman. What do you do today? I mean, what does Adora Crystal Evans do?
Thanks for using the whole thing. That Adora Crystal Evans is my birth name, and the initials are ACE. And
I didn't even recognize that.
Yeah, there's been a whole process of God showing me that how he even chose my name and all the elements of that. And it's come in layers over the years. And now there is another Adora Evans, which forever I was like, another Adora is shocking.
How dare you?
You're like, right, but then Adora Evans. Yeah, that's how those things go. But so my core focus, I am the founder of the Diva Network with Christine Curran, which is a network where we bring women together to elevate, to collaborate, to learn how to do that. And then they also get invited onto my other big gig, which the Diva Network is in collaboration with Destination Divas and Dining Divas Texas. So I'm the executive producer on Dining Divas Texas. I'm an executive producer on Destination Divas when we do it around a mastermind. And those are TV shows that air on WeTV, Travel Channel, and will be coming up on Apple, Google, and Prime. And so
Wow.
we're experiencing the best of Texas, the best of these destinations. But then what's really fun is we have conversations with the entrepreneurs to find out, just like we did, right? We're sitting around going, what do you do? Why are you doing it? What did you overcome? What are you trying to grow to next? It's just like that, but over a meal. And so we always like show the chef and explain, get into his story as well. There's always like a meal experience, usually multiple. But we've filmed from the back of from inside of a hot air balloon, from and now that I'm saying that, just like that takeaway that the lake day was so important for me, that I've had 20 years in transformation, and like I'm here to elevate the planet, help women, set people free to be all they're meant to be, and with intensity. And I've happened into media, and Dining Divas was this little fun thing that I happened into, that I would go and we'd dress up in ball gowns, and all these beautiful women that are also driven would be helping each other with our hair, riding horses, hot air balloons, boats, jets, all the things. Total blast. And it was like my fun, joyful thing that became the place where I could actually do the most good, because the women started going, I got the nickname HR, and the women started going, Adora, help us. There's a breakdown in communication. We're committed that we don't want to gossip, but right now I'm really feeling like, and I would come in and mediate and teach, language or personality types or something like that. And so it's been just really wild to see how, while I was over here being super intense, the fashion, the fun, the playful thing, and allowing myself to experience that has now created this world where I get to do both. And I'll say more about where the Diva Network is going later, but I will say it's creating global impact is where we're going next, and rising up women and therefore communities and businesses everywhere. And this wouldn't be the way that I imagined it, because it's so much fun. It's like I imagined, and transformation is fun. I love that. I really do. And I love speaking and stages and all that stuff. But this is like, when you call yourself a diva, it's the opportunity to, which we have a positive statement for that, but it's the opportunity to turn it all the way up. I get to show up anywhere in glitter and glam, and it's really on brand. It's really like, so that's been really fun to see that happen. I don't think everyone wants or needs that, but apparently my soul did.
So this is under the reality TV category.
Yeah, it's semi-scripted reality. So when I say semi-scripted, it's like, okay, we know we want to show an entry. We know, like for instance, we just did an episode at a ranch, which Ken was there.
Hmm.
Um, and it's the coolest ranch. So we know I want them to think Texas, we're going to a ranch, and to come up with some stereotypes. But then you don't expect Barbie to own the ranch, to be able to have a happy hour with a giraffe, swim with otters, ride a water buffalo. So we kind of script some of those things of like, we want to surprise them, but then it's authentic conversation. What is the real scenario that would go down in this experience when you bring these people together,
So my understanding of reality TV, it's like the three C's. It's character, conflict, and controversy. And what is the hook is the conflict and the controversy. It sounds like this is not the formula that you're doing. That it's there, that there's a message behind it, and it's to help people. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, and there is an element of that, but I'll tell you where it is. So when this show began, Dining Divas out of Florida, Christina has 6 years out there. It was more, think of the food shows, the
Yeah.
reality food shows where you're eating things, experiencing things, travel things. Those don't necessarily have the conflict is, am I going to like this? What is this? That's how it started, with an element of she wanted to see beautiful women, not just one woman. She went, look at that guy. Like, this would be way more entertaining with beautiful women, which speaks to she was already a gal's gal, even though
Right.
she hadn't been in self development yet. And then it evolved that when you start having conversations where the grit and the controversy, the characters are the divas and and the guests that come, but it's in the stories of the entrepreneurs or in the tension of what's about to happen. When you are you going to stay on the water buffalo, or are you going to fall? It's more, so it's not the reality. We're definitely not the real housewives. And you're right, you still have to have like what happens, and like what happens at a table like this. So we're having these experiences, but what happens when you bring that kind of group to people, and what opens? And that's where the Diva Network was born. Is like, I was having so much fun. And I remember I was about to post another picture in some glorious environment. And I went, what does this have to do with the person watching? Like,
Right.
where can I bring them into this environment? How can they? And as I'm just like, we came from that event, we made outrageous connections. You're already acting on stuff. We're producing this together right now. We have future possibilities together. I went, how do more? That's what was happening for us every show. So I was going, how do I let more people have access to this? Because as much as I love fun and fashion, I'm a meaning and impact driven person. And so the Diva Network is like, okay, we can bring people together weekly and allow them to get training on how do you maximize a community like this? How do you collaborate? How do you rise? And giving them access to the same people, resources, info that we have. And then the second meeting is putting them in breakout rooms where they are then
Hmm.
trained to connect, create things, collaborate. And we're measuring that to go, are we winning? Are we just high fiving and feeling good in there? Like, what are we creating? And then when we film an episode, what we're doing now is opening a part of that episode for the public so they can come dress up, be in the pink carpet, have the glamorous, experience. And so I'm really excited about where
It
we're
sounds amazing. And I want to submit a beautiful diva who is probably one of the best cooks or chefs out there. And that's my fiance, Lee McGuire. So
yeah,
she fits the script. And so what a
really
great
excited. We got to
concept.
talk about having her on. Right now we do guest divas, and so we've got our core, but we bring different ones every time. So I love Lee, and you're right. One of our divas has a pageant company, and her husband have several medical device companies. And she was Miss Texas, and I know Lee was like Miss Oklahoma. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, there's so much synergy there. We've got to definitely create you all come into play somehow.
Be great. Well, you mentioned the word transformation.
Mm,
Okay. And before you got to where you're at today, personally, it hasn't been easy. It
mm-mm.
hasn't been easy. And you have an incredible story. Share with us a little bit the life of Adora Crystal Evans, Ace.
Mm.
Uh, what your life was like, and and then what happened, and how you got to where you're at here today.
Yeah. Yeah, so when you say was like, you mean like childhood kind of, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I,
Yeah.
and I thank you for bringing that forward, because we all have where we come from. And I heard a Stormy, I think her last name is Wellington, say we're born like our parents, but we die like our choices.
Wow, I like that.
That's a good one, right? And so I love my parents like you love your parents, and we're all born into some part of the fabric of humanity. And the part that I was born into, the time that I was born in, my father he was an alcoholic. And my parents divorced very early. My mom left very early. I was actually later realized that my father hid us for several years. So it was a kidnapping. But my
Wow.
experience was my mom left. So I was coming in at 2 years old saying, Dad, please don't kill yourself. I was brought in to go, please don't do that. And this man, my father, was my very first love and the love of my life, and the one I loved, to hang on his shoulders and do all the things. And so, that's a big responsibility for a young child to take on, calming your father, the at 2, 3, 4. So
Yeah.
that stuff. And then mom left very early. My experience was we were supposed to go to a school because there was a fire or something, and then I didn't see her for like 8 years, like once a
Wow.
year for like, so it wasn't until later as an adult that I put the pieces together. Oh, she did come back, and we were hiding and running. And there was a 2 year period where my dad hid, and then she didn't want to disrupt the whatever. But and she was dealing with drugs. He was an alcoholic. My dad remarried. We went to I think I counted 18 schools before ninth grade. And
Mm.
they were moving in homeless people in exchange for babysitting and a new person to put the bills under the names. And I kind of, in this moment, I'm feeling like I don't want to just dig in on all the things they did wrong, because they're humans, and he was dealing with his own addictions. And I only share to tell you the facts of my experience from my lens at that age. And
Right.
12 years old, I remember my grandma moving away to Tennessee, and we had several houses. Her house was on the property. She had a rental house, and then we had put a trailer in the back. And I was allowed to move into her house when she left at 12 years old. My boyfriend could come stay the night. And I mean, I have a 13-year-old now. That's bananas, right? That's bananas. So it just kind of gives you like this kind of rocky. Now, where did it start to change? At 15 years old, so my mom was Wiccan. 13 years old, my dad decides he's going to move to Tennessee. I'm like, no way am I going to this one stoplight town. I'd let down some walls. I thought we were staying. I had my first love, And he said, we're going to go to Tennessee, and the only way you can stay here is if your mom lets you live with her. I had no real relationship with her that time. I didn't know what she was going to say, but she did. She allowed me to come live with her. We moved to a little town, Greenville, Texas. She was Wiccan at the time. She,
What do you mean by Wiccan?
like studying, she just identified as white magic, like studying white
Gotcha.
magic. Um, and she was kind of like, if you want to drink, drink with me. If you want to smoke, smoke with me. But she had firm rules and curfews and stability, and just a different experience than before. But then, I learned later words and touch, part of my love languages, and my father's love languages were not her love languages. So I already had this feeling of like, you left me, you don't want me, and now you won't hug me. So it was just a really tumultuous time. I started drinking at 8 years old, and so anyway, I'm saying that because when I moved in with her, and this is a pivotal moment that I'm coming to, I went, okay, am I going to drink? Am I not going to drink? Am I a cowgirl? Am I a hip hop girl? Am I it's kind of that age.
You're
And
trying to find yourself.
yeah, and I remember I'd been drunk the weekend before with some teenagers, and I was in my room, and we lived in right across the street from the projects in Greenville, Texas, which weren't. It's not terrible. It's a small town, so it's not like
Right.
Chicago, Hampton, but it's still like Section 8 housing and all that. And I
Yeah.
was a minority in our apartments. And I remember thinking I was a pack rat too, because we were, I saved all the clothing. Was designing clothing. And so I remember seeing one of the girls and thinking, it doesn't seem like she has a lot of clothes. I wear this once a year. I think she might like this, you know? And then I had these Barbies in a box under my bed, and I was like, the little girl upstairs, I think she might want these, you know? And so before I knew it, my bed was stacked high, full of things. And I was like, I mean, I'm 45 now and I'm energetic, right? But so imagine 15, you know, I'm like getting really high on the idea of giving all these things away.
Yeah.
And the scripture, and I don't know if I learned this from my grandparents. I don't know if I learned it from Vacation Bible School that used to pick us up because we didn't grow up in church. But the scripture, other than like that, Vacation Bible School, the scripture that came in my head is give and you shall receive.
Mm.
And so I was like, I remember I threw up my arms and I was like, God, that's what I need. I give you every moment of every day for the rest of my life. And I walked out like saucers. I'm sure my eyes were like saucers. Mom, I just gave. And she's just like, okay, you know, all right. And she's very logical. And I just remember going to school, starting a giving club. I'm like, we need to get and collecting things. And somewhere I found a Bible. I don't remember where. And then the words started to jump off the pages to me. And even though it was a King James, it went from feeling like foreign language to I would be in class and I would be like, did you guys know that God buried Moses and nobody knows where he is? And I'd be like flipping out over this stuff. And so people started dropping out of my God club and or my giving club because they said, you know, it started as a giving club. Now all you're talking about is God. And then these on fire Christians started hearing about me. You're the girl who's on fire for God. And I remember I showed up at a hospital in Greenville with a handful of kids. And I was like, we're here to visit sick people. And they were like, do you have an appointment? You know, what do you mean?
Right.
And I'm like, the Bible says you got to visit the sick. So we're here to visit the sick. And they're like, you're going to need to talk with the chaplain. So the chaplain was like, where do you go to church? And I give him pretty much a fraction, not the childhood, just, you know, what happened and what's been going on. And he said, okay, I want you to come to my church. Well, when I got to their church, it was like energy, like people are running around the room. They're like, and
Ooh.
it's how I felt inside. And so I was like, this is my church. Well, I started to notice they didn't wear makeup, they didn't cut their hair, they didn't, it was a United Pentecostal church. And all I knew is the amount of peace and liberation that I had. I wanted to do whatever God wanted me to do. And by environment, I thought I just started cutting all that stuff out, which was crazy because everybody who knew me knew that was the big hairspray days. I would take 2 hours just before I'd go to the mailbox as a
Like
teenager.
the Bon Jovi days.
Yeah, those days. So, so I, you know, that started really freaking people out. Like, is she in a cult? Like, what's happening here? You know? And then slowly I started to question, not out of doubt, but okay, why do we believe what we believe? And then, you know, it's like, oh, Jezebel wore makeup. Well, you know, so the things started, that story started to kind of fall apart. And I found myself in a non denominational church and became Bible club president. He got married at 17 to someone who was in college to be a pastor. And anything you want to say about that before I take us to the next?
No, keep going. This is good because I know it takes a turn.
Takes a turn. So then I didn't plan this, but so I forgot to say at 15, my mom asked me to move out. She was always saying at 18, like, hey, I mean, at 18, you're going to move out. Hey, you know, and I already felt like does she even want me? We had this kind of background baggage that in hindsight is easier to assess. In the moment, felt like I'm not wanted here. She can't wait to get me out. And she just said, if you don't like it here, you can move out. Or if something does, and it made, I heard it as move out. I don't want you here, you know?
Right.
And so I went and told a friend. My mom wants me to move out. They said you can come stay here. And and so when I went to move out, she told me if you move out, you cannot move back in. And I was like, I'm moving out. Everything in me,
Mm.
emotional teenager, was like, you don't want me here. And that's the way I heard it and believed it for a really long
Right.
time. So I ended up on couches of friends until eventually one of my best friends in high school, her mom said, "You're my daughter. Come stay here." And she treated me just like a daughter. It was the first time I had curfews. We had Bible studies. We had prayers. We had all the things. That's going to make me a little, that makes me a little emotional. But yeah, I called her my spiritual mom, just the first
Mm.
experience of like someone who really still didn't, didn't have anything to gain out of it other than wanting to serve and wanting to help me.
Yeah.
So I ended up living there, getting married at 17. I led all these people to Jesus in high school. I was supposed to say prayer at graduation. My husband then is going to Oral Roberts University, and not by plan. I was working at a restaurant and I started to get this urge that I needed to go see my family in Tennessee. And at the same time, a cook or one of the guys who was bus boys or whatever was really flirting with me. And very quickly, it felt like I just got swept into this, let's go to Tennessee together. And I remember telling God, don't talk to me. I'm going to make this move. And um, we were able to buy this little car with my tax return. And I remember my heart pounding and being like, if he doesn't get the car, I'm bailing out of this. But if he gets the car, there's no turning back because I've already bought this car and I've done this thing. And like, felt very final. Everything felt final and huge and like no turning back and burn all the bridges kind of, feeling. And I ended up being April Fool's Day that I ran away in the middle of the night with another guy for no reason I could explain. I wasn't in love with him. We get to Tennessee and we have the only car that can take my dying grandmother back and forth 2 hours to the hospital. And
Wow.
I'm in the most torture I've ever been in because I know I'm defying God. I know that I'm purposely ending. I had sex so that I would never be taken back. But if I talked to my dad would say, stay here, go make me a grandbaby. You belong here. And I'd want to please him. If I talked to my ex, I would feel guilt and shame. And, like I'm so, fallen. And now I've destroyed I had a vision of being a pastor's wife and being in ministry. If I talked to my little sister, I would say, so I was very internally tortured. And then I remember my,
So this was a part of your story that you turned from God. I mean,
yeah,
I call it self will run riot.
that's
I
right.
got this,
I got
and
this.
what did that look like? When you turned from God and there was a fork in the road,
Yeah,
and it sounds like you took, and I can relate. I did it too. You took Adora's route,
that's right. That's
and
right.
God loves us so much, He'll let us. Talk to us about that route.
Yeah. I mean, and that the work that you do and the work that we invest in healing our traumas, that was trauma driven, very runaway bride,
Yeah.
beyond the mind. Run. Running had been safe, moving had been safe. Keep it, like there. And in that, I made a conscious choice,
Mm.
driven. And I'm not saying trauma is an excuse because we are still accountable for what we do with that and how we handle it and all of that. So yeah, I was still 17 years old at that time doing all of that, already married. Now the town scandal. What is interesting is the day that my grandma died, the car died too. And then isn't
Wow.
that wild? And then I
Yeah.
went back. I went back and I was too embarrassed to go to that high school. So I went to where a friend that I had from middle school in the first town. her mom let me live with her, and I graduated high school and hid out. We got our divorce, and then I had this whole shame of, which is another thing people go to when they fall, and the shame cycle in addiction or in like staying, instead of walking into God's grace. I now thought, it's written, no ministry for me. I have no purpose. I screwed it up with everybody, including the one unconditional guy, which isn't true, but it felt true at 18.
Right.
And so, had a few bumps like that, got married again. Okay. Got back in church, got married again at 19. We were both still in the, you should not be having sex. So if you're having sex, get married. And so, got married again, had my son supernaturally. I prayed prayers over him. I had painless childbirth on Christmas Day, and worship music was playing. It was a beautiful, beautiful, still one of the peak memories in my life. God told us his name before he was born, Josiah. And our second
Wow.
son is David. So my ex-husband is David. So it's normal. The first son is David, but God, I got that inkling. And then the pastor was teaching about Josiah. So I'm saying all that to say God's grace was there. It was happening. It was all that.
Right.
Yeah. And then we started having problems. And next thing I know, I'm, looking at running again, getting out again. And I was teaching jazzercise at that time.
I remember
And
that.
someone, remember those leg warmers? Bring them back. I'm going to bring them
Yeah.
back. Yeah. So I was teaching jazzercise. And then someone told me, you can work in Dallas, and I needed money for a lawyer to get a divorce because possession is law, and the retainer was $5,000, and I've never held that much money. I didn't have good credit, any of that. So they told me, you can work at this men's club, and you can work at this men's club. Are the dogs bothering you? Can you hear that?
No, it's good. It's good.
So they said, you can work at this men's club, and the outfits are pretty much like your jazzercise outfit, except for the stockings are sheer, and you'll make a lot of money. And so I started driving, to and from, and that progressed to me, not just, me thinking I'm just going to get enough money to get out of this, to get my sons. I'll just work weekends, to like, hey, I could make more money as a dancer.
So
And
you're oblivious to what you're getting into.
I wasn't totally oblivious. I
Okay.
was at a place I didn't expect to go become a dancer. I knew what I was doing was not like, I wouldn't announce that in church. It was a definite, I'm doing my own thing. Um, but it was, as many of the things that people find themselves like, I'll just have one drink turns to 20. I'll just
Right.
have this one flirt turns to an affair. I'll just step in when we think by our will we can handle certain things, or control certain things, and that the rules don't apply, or like, why are those rules even there, right? I went in planning just to be a waitress, and to earn money. And then I got swept. We're a product of our environment, right? I
Right.
started going, I'm gonna go in, and I'll work on the weekends. I'll make a couple $1,000s. I'd never made money like that in my life. And in hindsight, because there's another turn, but in hindsight, I kept telling myself I wanted to get out of there, like at a certain place. And what ended up happening is I was spending less and less time with my child Josiah. I was spending more time recovering from the 4 a.m. nights and the drinking and the smoke environment. Even when I didn't drink alcohol, it takes like a recovery. I was spending the money as fast as I was getting it. And I was still reading books. I remember sending half of my income to my siblings and being like, okay, you need to listen to Tony Robbins. I sent them the personal power thing. I sent them cash flow quadrant. Made them send me invoices, and then I would send money to them. So it was wild because I still had this like belief that there was a God. I started to question Jesus completely. Like, is it God
Mm,
or goddess? Is it the Native American roots? Is it energy? Is it, and I was always talking to God. I'd be like, whatever your name is, the true name, the higher name, the goddess, the infinite, and I would confuse myself with that. And then, I could not get myself to break free. I knew that was not the environment I wanted to stay in, but I couldn't will myself out of the place. And back to the trauma healing, I know in hindsight, I was not only the environment and the choices. I'm not a victim. I walked into those places. I made the choices to be there, and then up comes the trauma to match that. That because I had been, sexually abused age 8 to 12 by my very favorite uncle. I thought we had a grown up relationship. I thought it was appropriate. And then when I learned it wasn't, I thought, I don't know anything about anything. I'm a fool. I'm ashamed. All these things that what I didn't realize was driving me deeper is that I really believed my core value was in my body because
mm,
that is what attracted someone to protect me, talk to me, which he wasn't
yeah,
protecting me, right?
yeah.
But it felt, yeah. So, yeah, so that was a whole chapter.
So in that part of your story, as your source of income, all right, I have two questions. Wow, the spiritual warfare. Let's just break it down real simple. After just one night of work, I mean, was when you got home, and was it dark, or were you going through spiritual warfare of what I'm doing is not right? And how would you justify that to keep going to go back the next night?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. If I'm recalling back where um, I was feeling so hurt by what was going on with my ex-husband. And I think whatever over sexual, I did grow up in a very sexualized environment. Very, like, I
Mm-hmm.
remember my dad bringing a stripper for my stepmom with all the kids in the room. And like,
Mm.
we grew up in a very sexual environment. I have very many memories, and that molestation wasn't the only one. I've had, so many where I was supposed to be babysitting or helping a woman clean, and then I wake up and her husband is kissing me, and I never told anyone. There were just so many
Very
experiences,
confusing. Very
very
confusing.
confusing, that I had a very alive, addicted body myself, and a relationship to sexuality. And I think there was also this feeling of someone used to overpower me, I'm going to overpower them and make
Mm.
money on it. I'm going to manipulate them, and I'm going to, even though it wasn't, I think I've always identified as I got most friendly, most courteous in high school. I've always had an identity that I'm a loving person. I'm not a vindictive person. I'm not a gossiping person. Even in the heights of my thing, I'd be mediating people. But I think I was like, they're paying for this. They want this. I think there was a, like, feeding of some kind of, all of it. It's all this, the
Well, it
addiction.
sounds like it sounds like your
Yeah.
gift, which I can relate, and Lee's the exact same way, is that we love to serve and help.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and early in our life, we do that because it's a high, but we don't realize why it's making us feel so good. So we
Right.
continue to do this
Right.
to any length,
Yeah.
to any length, but yet we're still felt so empty,
Yeah.
so not completed, and that guilt and shame, comes in.
And
Um,
the spiritual
right?
warfare. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the difference between my story and yours is I didn't grow up in that. I didn't have any spiritual warfare, so the world and the culture was normal to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I didn't have that battle. So I always am intrigued by like Lee growing up as a PK preacher's
Yeah.
kid, and you growing up, in the Word and searching for God.
Yeah.
I didn't do that, so
Yeah.
that spiritual warfare and confusion was probably really magnified. The guilt and shame that the church is right and I'm wrong, and so I got to keep this a secret. And as you know, secrets keep us very sick.
Yeah.
Um, and
Well,
so,
and at that point, I had embraced ideas that, like, I remember the whole time I was in there, I was more about goddess and infinite intelligence and energy flow. And even because there's a whole dogma about there that's like, that prostitution, the sacred prostitute is like this healing element and agent. And so I was not thinking I'm doing something against God. I was thinking more like I want to be a successful businesswoman and it's not going to happen in this environment. Like, I'm not proud to go. Like, if I went to the club, I danced like the most prude person ever. I was not like dropping it like it's hot. So there was definitely still shame.
right,
There's still shame there, but there was also all of this other element, the amounts of money, the attention from men, and
right,
there was a lot of, yes, there was a lot of disgust and disappointment, and seeing girls, on drugs, seeing people, like weeping on stage because they're on heroin or they're on speed or they're on there. And thankfully, I had such a fear of loss of control. That's been a gift that God gave me, that drugs weren't, while I had alcohol at different times, but even then I moderated that because I saw I made less money when I drank. I would just
mm,
get lazy and kind of sit around and chat. So and that was a protection, that I was afraid of losing my sober mindedness. And so I tried a handful of drugs, but I was always the girl going, guys, we can create this within ourselves. We shouldn't be doing this. So there was a lot of shame on who I was being as a mother, and who I was being, period. But there was a fantasy of like, I'm going to get through this, and like not ever breaking through this, and looking for mentors in the club, looking for successful men that would teach me, and I would one day become this, something. So
yeah,
it
I want
was,
to back up to something that you mentioned that I
yeah,
want I want to touch on is that it, we often get caught up trying to create a God
yeah,
that will co-sign on our behaviors and
yeah,
say that's our God. You
yeah,
see what I'm saying? As
yeah,
opposed to the true God, the living Word, the gospel and the truth. This is the way it is. And I can relate to that. I want to ask you a question about this environment,
yeah.
and is that what was the common denominator that you saw with all the other women in this environment of why they were doing this? Because I hear a lot. We've had a lot of guests on the show that have been in this environment, and I have a theory behind it. But what was the common denominator, your takeaway that you saw with all these women?
The vast majority had been through some kind of sexual abuse as a
Yeah,
child. The vast majority. There were a few that supposedly grew up in, really strict Mormon homes, and it's an act of rebellion. But I don't know that they weren't abused. And
right.
you know what I mean? We didn't go that far, but just knowing what I know now, I
So
would
this
say,
occupation, it's safe to say, was their drug of choice because the trauma. What we do is we seek the visible things to fix our invisible problems to ease the pain and
yeah,
ease the suffering.
yeah.
Um, so
Or it
let's
just
fast.
feels natural. That's the one of
Yeah,
the lies, is that, and even what you said about my father, or God, how we create God. My dad, one of the challenges was his parents, his mom told him, said all the worst things to him. You'll never be nothing, blah, blah, blah. So he, vowed to do the opposite, and he could never tell me no. So he was the guy that would co-sign on anything that I wanted, that could never discipline me, that would never, that's why I was out everywhere. I mean, I even remember him asking, do you want me to press charges? Then a couple weeks later, that uncle saying, I want to dance with you. And me going to my dad and saying, he wants to dance with me, and he'd say, what do you want to do? So often that's the other broken part, right? Is that we come into a world where our parents are not perfect. And then we make a model, or we adopt a model of seeing God and the world as we see our parents and who they are. So however they showed up, whether really strict or really distant, or really, the younger brother was the favorite, all those things show up in our relationship with God now. Even if you've never walked through anything crazy like this, you may
Right.
have always believed that the sibling is the favorite. So then with God, you're like, you favor everybody else, but not me. Right? Like I have to work.
Yeah.
So those stories, they're all, but it's all spiritual warfare, because we know we wrestle not against flesh and blood. These are just the symptoms of the fallen world and all the traps. But the good news is, as many traps that as there are that are laid for you, there are blessings and opportunities, and God is relentlessly hunting, calling, pursuing. And it, depending on our choices, and every single story is different. Only God judges the heart, but we each have these different moments when, like, you receive and take it in.
People are listening and watching this. They're like, okay, let's get to what happened.
Yeah.
How did you get out of this industry, the awakening, and to Adora getting into the gospel, and what happened? What was the bright light experience that got you away from this?
Yeah. So there was a series of events, and, I think God will try to move us out gently, or the consequences will start to be small, and then the momentum and the consequences get bigger and bigger, right? So,
Believe me,
I,
I know.
yeah, I know, 27, what is it, mugshots? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the first thing was that I developed a smoke allergy from that place. That if I worked there one day, I'd be out 3 or 4. My throat would like really tighten. I'd get kind of sickly, but that wasn't. I didn't listen, right, to my body. Everything in me was going
Right.
out of here. Well, then someone that I thought was going to mentor me. I wish I could say it was this bright light. I've made it. I'm free. This aha moment. It was a breakdown moment that led to like,
Literally, mentor a
yeah.
man.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So this guy that I thought was going to mentor me, that works for the World Bank, was like, "Oh, your energy, blah blah blah." He ended up putting Rohypnol in my tea, drugging me, and thinking that I had drunk alcohol. He was counting on that, and so it took me a few days to realize what happened. I actually thought because I had images and I knew what happened between us, but I asked myself questions like, did I lead him on? Do I have a brain tumor? That tells you where my value was and what I
Yeah.
believed about myself, how much I trusted my other people over myself. And that happens a lot to women, especially, and maybe men, but I know for sure women who've been sexually abused or physically abused, and they disassociate from their bodies. They start to think other things outside of themselves have the answers, the inklings, and they can't trust the God in them, the inklings in them. So anyway, so then I ended up going and getting a test, and they were like, you have traces of Rohypnol. And we went through the whole thing. The guy admitted guilty right away. And something else happened just days before that was equally monumental and a violation. And it was like all within these few days. And so I went, God, I remember praying on my knees and just going, God, I do not know what I've turned off in my intuition, but I'm not a child anymore. And like, turn it back on, turn it back on. And, I had a dream that night, and I always journal my dreams. And there were lots of messages in that dream. one, that this was generational. There was nothing I could do before now. But then there was a whole dream about a guy that I ended up seeing the next day. It took a while for that to turn on. I got my son out of there, and it ended up that guy is he was listed as a child molester in the
Mm.
pool. And it was like that moment God showed me, I've turned it on, and you're okay now, and then I signed up. I still wasn't saying Jesus. It was like God. I always use the word God because I wasn't sure if Jesus was man-made, or like, I don't know. I had a lot of like Jesus or hell. That doesn't seem right. And so I signed up for Landmark Education, which is a powerful, transformational, get behind your stories, trauma kind of thing. And I wrote down, and I read Think and Grow Rich. So I wrote down, I just want to um, I want to believe that I can earn money like this outside of using my body. That was the only thing on Landmark's application. And then with Think and Grow Rich, which again, um, I was relying on self development because I was scared to get it wrong about, telling everyone Jesus is the only way. And then what if there are other ways? And I was wounded, And
Yeah.
so I relied on what I could. And so Think and Grow Rich, there's a chapter where you write down everything and then you shout it out loud, 3 times a day. You're supposed to write a little paragraph. I filled a notebook and like the flip cards, the index cards, and I shouted it. And I, really was an overachiever with that. But I wrote down that one of the things I'd like to do is to interview successful people, because that whole book is based on Napoleon Hill interviewing all these people, but that I want to be paid for it. And this is another important part. Nobody knew what I wrote down. Nobody knew what had happened to me. And another guy that I met in that same club called me and said, Adora, there's a job that I had when I was younger. It gave me an incredible skill set. I think you'd be really good at it and be really good for you. I can't get the job for you, but I can get you the interview, and you'll have to pass the psychology test. You'll have to do. And I was in this desperate yes. And some of you, maybe what I'm talking about, where you're so like broken and ready for life that you'll just obey whatever that next thing is. And I'd seen him be successful. So I went and got an Ann Taylor suit, went and like tried to make my makeup look older. I buried that I'd ever been a dancer, passed they did the whole personality testing and passed all the psychology tests, get the job. And it ends up as a producer on the Discovery Channel for a Pat Summerall Productions called Champions of Industry. And the job, what it meant was, in order to produce the show, I was handed these stacks of CEOs that were revenuing over 10 million per year, and I had to cold call them and interview them. Was the sales process of having them, pay to be featured on this show. And my name, so our quota was one deal a month, and they were $26,000 deals. And I was closing 5, 6, 7 because I wasn't even done with the book. And I knew that I prayed for this, that, like today, you might start a podcast, you might go to journalism school, you might do something like that. But it felt like it came from nowhere. And I guess the important part for anybody listening, and you and I have talked about this, is that even though it was bad choices that put me in that club, and it was sin and death and spiritual warfare against me and my lineage and my children, and all, like, that moves me when I think about my grown men. I have 2 grown men and this 13-year-old daughter. There was a war against all of that to take out and lock up and destroy, this spirit, this person. And in the middle of that, in that dark place, wherever you are, whatever choices you've made, God is always creating an opportunity. God created an opportunity from within that club to answer a prayer that would change the rest of my entire life completely. Completely. Everything, every career thing I did after that was totally, related to that. And it came from that dark place. So it's like God is always there, whether whoever is listening, wherever you are, whatever situation you find yourself in, good, ugly, beautiful, self-inflicted, there's always an opportunity, and God will bring you that opportunity if you'll be willing to receive it. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for that.
What a beautiful story. And as we wrap up, something that I have a lot of respect for that you do today, and we got about 3 minutes. Human trafficking.
Yeah.
Your passion on that, and what are you doing, regarding human trafficking? I think everybody needs to hear this.
Yes, thank you. So we have Livia Fisher Kane and I started a company together called Project Uprise. And we partner with nonprofits that do the interception, the rescue, the rehab, the recovery, and helping them, whether it's doing events, helping with marketing, or what we're working on now is a whole curriculum base. Because after working with all these people, we found out even if you bring money, these people are dealing with thousands of hours of rape. They're dealing with thousands of hours of building an identity, usually when their brains were developing. And so I'm glad this is a great place to land it. Just like it took me however long to heal from believing that my value was in my body, even though logically I'd done all these things, and to move myself out of the industry and onto thriving and, all of that, is that many of these people, once they're rescued, and they go through the interventions and the crisis settling, and now they're launched into working at McDonald's or something like that. They're dealing with so much of belonging, imposter syndrome, not a skill set. And so many of them end up back, or they end up in the sex industry in some way, and it feels like who they are and what they're
Yeah.
destined to and what they're equipped for. So this is to alleviate that, break that up, give them trainings and access to skill trainings, job trainings, digital marketing, sale, all the training, plus the emotional tools for in between therapy, because some of them have therapists, but there's still all that in between time. And there's the parts that don't even want to go to therapy because they don't know they have an inner saboteur that is a spiritual warfare, for
Yeah.
their mind and their energy. So yeah, it's a big deal. And we're, it looks like we're going to be doing another film around that as well. But yeah.
Beautiful. Adora, we are so grateful to have you a part of the M2 The Rock family. And Lee and I are so grateful for you and looking forward to our friendship and how we can help each other. Um, we want you back on. We need women like you on M2 The Rock to provide hope for women, because, a lot of women out there have grown up like you, and I can't relate to women, but I have a passion, to guide them in the right direction. When women do reach out to M2 The Rock, there's a boundary that I have, that I feed them to healthy, godly women that can help them, because I can't relate, being a man. But I've come to this conclusion that all the women that reach out, the common denominator is they're looking for this, and that is a spiritual leader.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're looking for a father. They're looking for a spiritual father, which is Christ.
That's right.
And I can only imagine the world that women live in, because us men are nasty. Ungodly men are ruthless, and their motive is always self-seeking, and that's not okay, and that's not fair, because we are to love women like Christ loved the church, and you are a great example of redemption and hope. And what I love about you is you show the world who Christ is. We don't have to say Jesus, okay? We show them who Jesus is. And I have the utmost respect for you. We will have all of your information in the description, how people can contact you. Thank you so much for being on this show today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want anyone listening to know that the Redeemer is there, and the love is there. The hope is there, that there's a future, that God started something in you that wants to be completed. And if you're still listening, that there is a relentless love that values, respects, and will absolutely cherish and bring forth the best in you. And it's never ending. It's a safe, amazing place, and that is the truth. And so thank you so much for
Beautiful
the time. I appreciate you. And
make sure that you subscribe to this channel, and share this out, to so for other people can listen to this, and provide them hope. If you're listening to this on all of the podcast channels and audio format, please hit a 5-star, leave a review, because it gets us in front of more people to send the message. From all of us here at Into the Rock, remember this: I got 3 words, and it's got 8 letters, and it's only got 1 meaning. That's 3 words, 8 letters, and 1 meaning, and that is, I love you. Go make it a great day.